It's hard to deny at this point that BioWare isn't back. After 10 years of anticipation, we got this in return.
Isabella's apology worked for you, Tosh?
A smooth 5-head of a game. Made for the sort of people who think made-for-TV Disney movies are edgy. But how we got here is a far more complicated question. We've heard many explanations, from idiotic ones like its wokeness and DEI, to more sophisticated analyses that see the Veilguard as a victim of the chaos and instability that's surrounding BioWare since Inquisition. But what many of these explanations fail to account for is the bigger picture. You see, it's not just BioWare. In fact, the Veilguard is more representative of the norm in the AAA space at the moment. In the last few years, we've seen big AAA publishers pump more money, time, and expertise than we had ever seen before in gaming history into projects that are counterintuitively also far more derivative, less creative, and most importantly, less fun than what we come to expect from your average PS3 game developed on a fraction of the budget in a fraction of the time. And so I believe that to really understand the Veilguard, we need to delve deeper into the broader rot affecting the modern AAA industry. The same rot that is not only behind the dumpster fire of Veilguard, but the impending collapse of Ubisoft and implosion of Concord. Our story begins with feminism. I'm joking, ladies. I love all 2% of you currently watching the video. No, our story really begins with the 2011 release of Skyrim. It's hard to overstate how much of an impact Skyrim had, not only on the RPG space, but the broader AAA industry as a whole. You see, Skyrim at launch offered a project so universally compelling, it fundamentally changed the commercial expectations of the entire single-player space. To explain why, I need to give you some context. You see, in the pre-Skyrim PS3 era, selling a few million copies represented a massive financial success for single-player games. Mass Effect, one of those renowned titles of this era, only sold 2 million units in its first week. So when Skyrim came out and deservedly sold 7 in its first week and 10 million in its first month and never stopped, it completely altered what devs thought was possible. 2 million was fine in 2010, but after Skyrim it seemed more like pocket change, or as Trump calls it, a small loan of $1 million. And with this shift in perspective came a shift in their approach. A new zeitgeist took hold at the major studios that said single-player games should be aiming for one thing and one thing only: broad appeal. And this changed gaming forever. But you don't have to take my word for it. As the executive producer of the last Dragon Age game, Inquisition, put it in a 2014 interview, Skyrim changed the landscape for role-playing games completely. I mean, Oblivion probably sold 6 million units, basically that range. Skyrim sold 20 million. So that, to some degree, changes everything. Now suddenly you have 15 million people that have basically had the first RPG they've ever played as Skyrim. They have totally different expectations of what storytelling is, what exploration is, and I think exploration is really where we've seen the biggest change. Initially, this new shift in expectations was great for the RPG genre and the single-player AAA industry as a whole at first. Even fairly small studios like CD Projekt Red can now reasonably justify throwing immense amounts of money into extremely innovative projects because they knew there was an audience for it. That's how we get games like The Witcher 3 and Dragon Age Inquisition. But this golden age didn't last for long. You see, the larger studios realized that mainstream audiences primarily cared about accessibility and familiarity more than innovation because they're casual. So why invest in the unlikely prospect of creating a Witcher or Skyrim when you could just add the sort of accessibility features that enable a game like Skyrim to appeal to everyone onto an existing franchise without all that innovation and attention to detail, taking all the reward and none of the risk? This wouldn't have worked in the early PS3 and PS2 era simply because smaller, more genre-specific audiences celebrated experimentation over familiarity and comfort. They didn't want their stealth game to contain an open world, nor their RPGs to sacrifice role-playing in favor of cinematic sequences. And so devs were incentivized to constantly create new IPs and experiment with fresh ideas that would expand the boundaries of the genre. But in this new era where appealing to a legion of kids and casual gamers was the aim of the game, familiarity, nice graphics, and big worlds were more important to studios than potentially risky complexity and innovation. And when the live service trend kicked in and revealed it was now possible to make billions on a single game, the AAA space completely lost its head. But I'm sure you're wondering, if this is true, why did it take so long to become evident? Go back a few years and Ubisoft, the studio now widely believed to be on the brink of disaster, was at record highs. Well, it's because this strategy of trying to please everything and everyone with a high production sheen worked at first. Assassin's Creed is the perfect example of a franchise that's produced boatloads of cash because of its ability to adapt to current trends so effectively that, like a gender-fluid fluid chameleon, it lost any semblance of its identity. But as the reaction to Shadows reveals, this new generation of single-player gamers has slowly reached a point of fatigue that is hard to reverse. And the reaction to the Veilguard is another sign of this. You see, the Veilguard is a perfect example of a game ruined by an obsession with mass appeal. You see, to most non-power hungry, greedy, parasitic corporate CEOs, Inquisition was a massive mainstream hit. It sold 12 million copies, significantly more than either 2 or Origins, possibly combined, and won countless awards. But to the execs at EA and BioWare, 12 million just wasn't enough.
Work it, baby. Work it.
That doesn't even get you an Epstein Island ticket. And especially when compared to the virtual money trees in the live service market, the single player success Inquisition represented seemed almost time. A thing of the past. Why rely on individual creative spark and pesky writers when you can instead turn existing franchises with massive audiences into live service money churners? And so higher ups at EA tasked the devs to turn the next Dragon Age into a heist-based multiplayer game with integrated live service elements. And sideline the whole RPG side of things, at the expense of the staff that made their company great in the first place. But don't take my word for it. According to David Gaider, the lead writer on every Dragon Age bar the Veilguard, and perhaps the man most responsible for the tremendous success of the series, BioWare slowly turned from a company that vocally valued its writers to one where we were quietly resented, with a reliance on expensive narrative seen as the albatross holding the company back. Maybe that sounds like a heavy charge, but it's what I distinctly felt up until I left in 2016. Suddenly all anyone in charge was asking was, how do we have less writing? A good story would simply happen via a magic wand rather than be something that needed support and priority. Now it's true BioWare did slightly backtrack. After Anthem proved no one wants this, the development of the Dreadwolf at the time shifted towards a more traditional BioWare fare, and this is how we ended up with the Veilguard. But it's not hard to see the legacy of this obsession with universal appeal all over its formula, from the hero shooter art style to the biggest legacy of this obsession in my mind, the writing. You see, despite what the quality of the companions and dialogue suggests, I don't think the Veilguard was helmed by bad writers. Yes, Origins OG David Gaider is gone, but the existing team of the Veilguard is still full of OG BioWare talent. In fact, its lead writer was the same guy that headed up Trespasser, a DLC with such an impactful narrative, the cliffhanger it established kept fans hyped for over a decade.
Live well, while time remains.
So to me, the fact that the dialogue is so functional and still is a consequence of fear, not incompetence. The team was so afraid of alienating your average 15-year-old who wasn't around for Inquisition, they decided to strip anything and everything that was up for interpretation in favor of a purely instructional form of dialogue. And if the backlash to the Veilguard teaches BioWare and the industry anything, it's that the era of accessibility is over. The mainstream has matured, and they'll most likely be flocking to the next Larian title and KCD2 over anything they can produce. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and let me know if you think I'm missing the mark with my analysis. Feedback never hurts, of course.